Please tell me your name.
Carmelita FitzGerald Nicholson,
And when were you born?
December 16, 1921.
And who are your parents?
Ave Maria Camarillo FitzGerald and George Gerald FitzGerald.
And how are you related to Don Adolfo?
Don Adolfo was my mother's father,
So your
so
grandfather.
he's my grandfather.
Okay. Did you have any nicknames growing up?
Tita,
Who called you that?
all my family, especially my father, always said Tita.
And I understand that your father had a nickname as well.
No, everybody called him George, I think.
Did your mother have a nickname?
Avita.
And she was closest to who in her family?
She and her older sister Rosa were probably the friendliest all through their lives. And then when they, in their older age, they lived close together and were neighbors and I think daily friends when they saw each other almost every day.
When you lived with your parents, in relationship to the ranch, where did you live?
It's my parents built a house 5 miles from here on the Los Angeles side of the ranch, away from Somas.
So in the area of Santa Rosa Valley.
It was Santa Rosa Valley.
Okay. And what did your father do?
He was a civil and hydraulic engineer. And I asked him once what that meant when I was very young, and he said he designed and built bridges in France during the First World War.
And what did he do here on the ranch?
He farmed. He and my mother built a farmhouse on the ranch, as I said, in Santa Rosa Valley, and they farmed lima beans, walnuts, citrus, everything that everybody else in the county was farming, and he did a very good job. He was a good farmer. He did whatever he did well.
Did he also survey for your grandfather?
Oh yes, he surveyed the ranch. He was the first man who did survey the ranch, and his maps are still on file in the county courthouse.
And how did he and your grandfather get along?
I think my grandfather respected him because engineering was something that my grandfather did not know, and my father did, and so he did ask him for advice.
And your grandmother?
My grandmother loved my father, and they were good friends, and they had the same sort of sense of humor, and he would take her for rides and show her a new tree or a new flower. She loved flowers and trees and horticulture.
And how did your mother and father meet?
Well, it was his first job after the war, First World War, and it was with the Edison Company, and he went to the Edison Company in Ventura and was given a job, and that night he was told there was going to be a big 4th of July celebration at the Ventura Hotel where the Edison Company had a room planned for him. So he went to the party, and a very lovely young woman sang the Star Spangled Banner, and he asked several people who it was, and they said, "Oh, that's Avi Camarillo. She has a beautiful voice, and she always sings the Star Spangled Banner on the 4th of July at the hotel here." And he said, "Well, please introduce me to her, will you please?" You know. So he found somebody who would introduce him, and then he, I guess, invited her to some function, and I think that was the 4th of July, and I think they were married in August because he was leaving for France. And so they were married in the Oxnard house of the priest in Oxnard, and then they had breakfast here at this house and had all the family. And then my grandmother decided she was going to go to New York with my mother because my mother was just going to go on the train with my father, and then he had to go to officers training camp. He went in as a lieutenant and then was graduated as a captain. And so he had told Mother that he wouldn't be able to be with her because he had to go to class. It was like going back to college, he said. And she didn't really like that idea, and I suppose she told her mother, and her mother said, I'll go with you. My grandmother was always one to enjoy something new, and she was not afraid of anything. So she got a ticket, of course, and went back to New York with Mother. Then they came back to Camarillo, and my father luckily came home after the war, and they started farming, and they built the house and lived here in Camarillo happily ever after.
Your father was Canadian?
He was born in Canada, and his mother was born in England. His father was Irish, and most of the FitzGeralds are Irish. They did marry a few English girls, but mostly they were Irish. But they still live in Ireland. When we were there, we met to meet them. They're wonderful people, good senses of humor. One of them said to my father, when they met years after the war, he said, George, you came to France for the First World War and you went right by Ireland and you didn't even stop in to see us. My father said, well, the general just wouldn't stop the boat and let me off so I could run in and say hello to you on the way to France, because the Germans were sort of in charge of the situation and they didn't permit things like that to go on.
His hands were tied, in other words.
They were funny people. Anyway, they always had something to joke about, and everybody seemed to understand everybody at that point. It was fun.
You got to know a little bit your father's father.
Yes, he used to come and visit us after his wife died, and he was alone. And he was a very, very interesting man, and would walk with my sister and me, and we'd go around the ranch, and he'd tell us stories about Ireland and his life and the family. So that's how we learned a lot about our relatives from Ireland, as we wouldn't have known probably.
And he had a very special job. Tell us a little bit about that.
He was, when he left Canada, he was made manager of a railroad company in Georgia. I don't remember the name of it. It was a small company, but prestigious in its way for some reason. I can't remember now at the time. But he did an excellent job, and so kept getting promotions. And he had 3 sons who wanted to go to Georgia Tech and become engineers. And so he used to teach them, and his wife got all the books that they needed for high school and college and kept them in the house. And every night after dinner, they studied. And they did trig and all the math, and she studied herself and taught herself. And then she taught them all the things that they needed to pass. And they entered without any difficulties. They passed the entrance exam. 3 young men they'd all been in France in the army, so they had good credentials. But they were good engineers. And the other 2 started an office in Los Angeles, which became very important engineering office while they were still alive. My father stayed in Ventura County and worked here, and he was the chief engineer for the Newhall Land and Farming Company in Castaic for years. And then he had he spoke sort of as an expert in court cases, in litigation of property rights, because he would have to survey any land that people trespassed, if there was an accident or
A lawsuit.
any kind of lawsuit. So he worked in court quite a bit, and as well as engineering.
What did you call your grandfather, FitzGerald?
Tata,
Tata. And you also called Don Adolfo.
Tata, because that was grandfather in children's language in Mexico.
What did you call your grandmother, Isabel?
Nana,
Nana.
yes.
What's your earliest memory of being here? Did you call it, by the way, I was going to say, what was your earliest memory of being on the ranch, but did you call it the casa, or what did you call coming here?
if we were coming here, we'd say we're going to Nana's house, or we're going to Tata's house, or we're going to Nana and Tata's house. That's what we always said.
Okay. And what's your earliest memory? Or a favorite memory?
Well, of course, I remember the ponies because I always loved horses. And whenever we were going to Nana's house, I knew that I was going to be able to ride a pony, at least pet a pony, or feed an apple to a pony or something, you know. It was just in my mind all the time. And so I always brought the apple to they had a big corral. It's gone now, but they just, the ponies played in the corral just like little toys, you know. They were so cute. My favorite was Negrito, which is Blackie in Spanish, Negrito. And he liked me very much. And so every time I went, I'd show him my apple from a distance, and he'd run over and, you know, I'd feed him the apple, and then I'd ride him bareback, and he just moved like a train. He was just wonderful to go round and round the ring, you know. And
Who taught you to ride?
well, I just watched people and taught myself. Actually, my father did. I mean, he would say, use both hands, you know, for the reins. Keep your heels down, your toes in, because he was a good horseman. And so he taught me a few things. Always keep your shoulders back. But I taught myself. My father taught me really.
Did your grandfather give you any pointers or ever comment to you about riding, or?
My grandfather used to come down when I was riding sometime and say hello, and he didn't talk very much, but one day I was sort of getting fancy, and I sort of took Negrito out and put a hackamore on him. That's without a bit, and was going to ride him outside the ring. You know, this is my escape, and I was going to do the whole ranch, you know, in an afternoon or whatever it was. But he got tired, and I did too, so I brought him home, and I tied him up on the pole with the rope, from the reins, and in a few minutes somebody came to me and said, Carmelita, Tata wants to see you in his office. Well, his office is downstairs in the corner, and we never went to his office. That was only for very important business. The children were not allowed in the front of the house. You know, we were in the back of the kitchen. And I thought, oh my God. And anyway, I went in. I knew I did something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And he said, you tied up that pony with the reins. And I said, yes, Tata. I didn't have the rope. He said, never tie a horse up to the reins. I said, see, Tata. And he said, go on, go riding. You know, get out of here.
So here you thought it was going to be something more severe, and it was an equestrian lesson.
I was so scared. I thought, I'll never do anything bad again in my life, you know. It's about the worst thing I could do. And all my little cousins, I was the oldest. So I used to boss them around, and I was a teacher. I'm the oldest, follow me. And so they said, Carmelita, what did he say? What did he say to you? I want to see Carmelita. You tell her to come immediately to my office. And all of them were so frightened for me, they told me. We were so afraid, Carmelita, he might spank you or something. I don't think he ever spanked anybody in his life, you know. Anyway, everybody laughs about it all the time. I can't see it. Martingale with a pony, a hackamore, without thinking of that story. Because I was just a little kid then. The only other time was I used to invite interesting young people in my high school classes, especially when I was a junior and senior, when I became more interested in young men in my high school classes. And of course, all of them said they could ride horseback. And you know, when I'd say something about a horse, they'd say, "Oh, tell me about the horse." And I said, "Oh, you ride? Oh, yeah, I ride all the time." And then I'd get them to the ranch, and they wouldn't know anything about riding. But the one time when I brought a very nice young man out, And I was saddling my horse, and I was keeping my eye on him saddling the horse that I had decided would be good for him, a slow one that would, I figured out that part, that he didn't need a fast horse. Anyway, and my grandfather appeared in his car. But I had permission to invite guests, but I didn't check them out with him every time. And we didn't give riding lessons to people that didn't know how to ride. Because I'd been told all about insurance and how important it is, that I didn't bring somebody who would fall and get hurt, and anyway, I didn't want anybody to get hurt. So this nice kid he didn't know how to put the bit in the mouth, he didn't know how to put the saddle on, he didn't know how to cinch the saddle, he didn't know anything. My grandfather went over and taught him how to saddle and bridle a horse. It was just the nicest, kindest act, and and this young man today is the president of some big,
huge corporation
yes,
or something.
Yeah, something big in New York or something, He was a really smart kid, and he caught on right away, but he didn't know anything about horses, but he did lie to me. He didn't, he thought he knew about horses just from seeing them in Disneyland or something.
I am skipping ahead, I think, a couple of years, but you do have a great story about bringing some flyboys to the ranch one night to show them Diablo.
Well, that was during the war. The P-38s were stationed here. That was a new airport, made just for P-38s. And everybody said they're the fastest plane, ever made, and Camarillo gets them, and we were all so thrilled. And so several people called and said, would you help, make some punch and cookies and have a little open house for them when they come over to the ranch and have opening day. So I had a few friends who were interested also in the same thing, and so we invited the whole squadron over to, and go to the airport and had cookies and punch, and so it sort of came up that I liked horses. I don't know how I happened to do that, but anyway, one of them especially said that he liked horses. He was from Texas, and so he said, I was telling me, Diablo was a gorgeous beast. I mean, 16 hands and the most gorgeous horse I ever saw in my whole life anyway. And he didn't like anybody but me. He would try to bite people and kick people, and he'd kick other horses, and nobody liked him but me. And I took him an apple every day, and he just loved me,
Now, he was your favorite white horse.
And he was my favorite white stallion, yeah. So I can't even remember this young man's name, but he had a car. Not all the flyers had cars, but he did. I knew he did, so I thought, it's more interesting to talk to somebody who has a car when you don't have one yourself. And so I said, oh, would you like to meet Diablo? He said, oh, yes. So after dinner, I guess he took me to dinner, and we came over, and he had a little flashlight, and we opened the stall, and Diablo just stood up on his hind legs. This poor man, he said, oh my God. He has a flashlight on the and so I say, Diablo down, trying to get him down. And he was angry because I brought this visitor down. I probably awakened him, I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, Diablo was very angry with this man, and I thought, he was mad at me, and he was just like a little spoiled child. And you know how horses get, just like people. And so anyway, he said, I think I've got to go back to the base. We're going to fly night flights tonight or something, So I said, okay. So it's sort of end of the beginning of the romance, whatever it might have been, I don't know. But somebody said, I heard him say to one of the other men, God, I was scared to death of that horse. It was just like a big dragon. And so somebody else said, my God, you'll fly any ship in the whole United States Air Corps, and you're afraid of a horse? He said, yes, I don't ever want to see that horse.
And that was the horse that you rode in parades,
That was
right?
my horse.
That was your
Yes.
horse. You loved Diablo
I loved
dearly.
him. I didn't want anybody to like him.
But he was aptly named, though, wasn't
Oh,
he?
yes, he was aptly named.
Who named all the horses, by the way? Do you
Well,
know?
my Aunt Carmen loved to do it. She really did, because Anytime I came over early in the morning, she'd say, "We have a new coat," and she'd put on her coat, and we'd run down and look at the new coat, and I'd say, "Who are you going to name him?" And she'd have a name already.
Oh, so Carmen was
Carmen named her. She was still at home. She lived at home.
Tell me about your education, starting with when you lived in Santa Rosa Valley.
Well, I lived in Santa Rosa Valley and went on a bus to Pleasant Valley Grammar School for kindergarten and the first 8 grades. Then I went to Oxnard High School, and then I went to Stanford University in Palo Alto, California for 5 years. Got my master's, wrote my book, got married, and still here.
So you wrote your book as part of your thesis?
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit, mention the name of the book is El Rancho Grande, and it really is a book about the ranch.
It took me a whole year, and it's just this little tiny book, and it took me a whole year to write. But I had to do lots of research, and they didn't have all the books I needed, the sources at Stanford, so I had to go to UC Berkeley. I have to admit that. And I do thank them because they did give me lots of help. They have a wonderful library at Berkeley.
And you actually interviewed your grandfather for
And
this
I
book as
interviewed
well.
my grandfather for most of the important things. And he wrote me letters, and I kept them, and I put some of those in the book. And I think he liked it.
So not only did you go to Stanford, but I understand your sister did as well.
And my younger sister, she's 15 months younger than me, and I both went to Stanford, yeah.
And your brothers?
My older brother went to USC, and my younger brother went to UCLA.
Now, there's a cute story about Jim at UCLA in a classroom?
Oh, that is funny. He sat beside a very pretty girl, he told me, because I was older, and I'd say, how's UCLA? And tell me about the girls you met. And so he said, I sat by a pretty girl, and the funny thing, I said at the break, can I buy you a Coke? So she agreed, and they went out to have a Coke, and they knew from the list, where the people were from, and they were seated in alphabetical order. And anyway, the girl knew he was from Camarillo. I don't know how she knew, but anyway, she said, I understand you're from Camarillo. And he said, yes, and where are you from? And someplace in Los Angeles. And he said, well, how did you know that? And she said, well, because my name is Ruiz, and my grandfather was in the army of the Mexican army and was given some land in Camarillo, and then my father couldn't make the payments, so Mr. Camarillo loaned him money and helped him make the payments, and then finally he decided to sell because it was a really too expensive undertaking to try to keep the big ranch, for a beginning person to start farming, and so my brother Jim said, oh, that's too bad because we bought it. It's sort of a funny story. They were good friends afterwards, and he saw them quite often. Very nice family in Los Angeles.
That's a great
But
story.
they're not a farming family,
That's a great story. Where did you receive your health care when you were growing up here? Was St. John's?
No, there was a doctor in Camarillo. Then I went to St. John's Hospital, for a hospital. There was no hospital.
But there was one doctor in Camarillo.
There was one doctor in Camarillo.
And where did you guys market when you were living on your father's and mother's ranch?
Howell's Market in Camarillo. It was right next to the Buckhorn.
Uh-huh. And where did you go with your mother to shop or buy clothes or?
Well, we liked to go to Los Angeles, really, because there wasn't much, I guess, here. At least my mother liked to. My grandparents had a house in Los Angeles that my grandmother used for shopping and recreation. Went to plays and opera. Mother always went to the opera season there, and because she sang and she loved music. So when we went to Los Angeles, we usually did some shopping and some sightseeing. She had lots of friends in Los Angeles too.
Your mother did.
My mother did.
And wasn't there a great story about, or you loved to come here to the ranch and Nana would go take you shopping in Santa Barbara or for clothes?
Well, as I said, I was the oldest, so she used to call me once in a while and she'd say, Carmelita, would you like to go to Santa Barbara today? Oh, would I? I knew what it meant. And so she had a driver. He was from India.
Do you
Very
remember what his
nice.
name was?
Indar.
Darn.
Indar. And so I went several times with her when I was in high school. It was very exciting because I saw things I never saw when I went with anybody else. You know, we were always five and dime people, and she was shopping at the top of the list. And she had beautiful taste, and she loved clothes. She had fun shopping. And she'd ask me, you know, my opinion. I didn't know anything anyway, but she looked good at anything she put on. You know, I wasn't lying.
You casually mentioned their house in Los Angeles. Do you remember anything about the house?
Oh yes, because it was like this house, only smaller, but it was 2-story and maybe 7 bedrooms. I think a big house, and they had a caretaker who stayed there all the time, so we could go anytime, just phone and say, you know, we're coming. During the football season, we all went down to SC games and UCLA games, and if Stanford played, we went, of course. But mostly we went to UCLA games and stayed at the house, and our cousins did the same, so we would see all our family there.
So it was really quite heavily used by the extended family.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that your mother would go to the operas down in LA. Was she a season ticket holder?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And did your father go along?
I think he didn't. I don't think he enjoyed the opera. I don't remember him ever going.
So do you
So
remember?
she would invite friends.
I
guess.
see.
I think probably maybe she had 4 tickets and she'd take a couple and maybe a single person or something.
And would she drive there?
She drove on the ranch and in Camarillo and to Ventura and Santa Barbara. I don't think she ever drove in Los Angeles.
So when you went on shopping trips to Los Angeles with your mother or to the Los Angeles house, would you take
Well, as soon
a
as
driver? Or-
I got my license when I was in high school, and so I always drove.
So you
So
remember driving?
I remember driving all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now we're getting to the good part.
What's that?
How'd you meet your husband? And what was his name?
I met Jim Nicholson on my sister's invitation to an open house at Oxnard High School. And she said, he's the new art teacher at Oxnard High School. And Carmelita, I think you would like to meet him because he's interested in art like you are, and you'd be able to talk to him or something. He has a good sense of humor or something. Anyway, I didn't mind going with her to a party, you know. So I said, sure. And well, it was even better than I expected. And so he invited me to something after that. I can't remember now. It's a long time ago. But then we were married in July 23rd. And here, the reception was here,
What year was that?
49. And
Where you were married in what church?
in St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church. Jerry was my maid of honor. My sister was my maid of honor. My brothers were ushers. His fraternity brothers were ushers. It's sort of a family thing. And we had mariachis and Mexican music, you know, and Mexican wedding, sort of. And then it was, we built the house on the ranch. We decided we wanted to live on the ranch. I wanted to live on the ranch, and he liked the ranch too. And he also liked horses. We agreed really almost on everything. And so then we had 6 daughters.
I was gonna say, you must have agreed on a lot more than that.
And they all have finished college now, and they're all married, and they have darling children, and they're very thoughtful of me and take good care of me and keep me from getting into too much mischief. And
Quickly, just tell us their names.
Martina was my grandmother's name. Martina, Allison, Susanna, I had a Tia Susanna, Aunt Susanna, Hillary with one L. We checked that out several times. And I was going to write to her and tell her, we checked out the spelling of Hillary and you're making a mistake, girl. Anyway, Hillary and then Mary and my youngest, Victoria. Did I hit them all?
Probably, because
Yeah.
you're the mom,
Yeah.
you know.
That's 6.
Okay.
Only one lives in Ventura County, Susanna Reeder. And she lives about a block away from me.
And Susanna was actually the name of your grandmother's, one of your grandmother's sisters.
That's
yes.
right, yeah.
Can I go back to your mother's education? I know that all of the Camarillo daughters went to public school here up until.
Well, then they went to public schools when it was available, and then they went to Catholic schools, and then they went to boarding school, and then they went to college to boarding schools, to college schools.
Didn't your mother have a nickname for one of those schools? They were all girls' schools, right?
Oh yes, this is a long time ago.
So didn't she call one of them the convent?
Oh yes, because the nuns were there.
Which school was that? Was she referring to?
Well, San Jose, the Sisters of Notre Dame.
So that's in Northern California.
Her diploma is, well, that's the picture of the house there. Her diploma is 3 times that size,
Wow.
and it says, this is Ave Maria Camarillo's diploma in voice and music from the College of Notre Dame in San Jose, California.
Do you remember her singing to you when you were
Always.
children?
Always. She
Always.
sang all the time. All the time.
Any favorite songs of hers
Well,
that she would?
she could sing Mexican songs beautifully, and she sang opera. She studied opera, really. She was thinking of being an opera star when she met my father. She told me, I don't know, but she had that idea. Anyway, and, she did. Her voice was beautiful, and if I'd only had some discs of hers, I'd be so happy now, because she had a lovely voice.
Were you musically trained?
Well, I took piano lessons, but I never did well.
You did well with the horses, is what
I
you
did
did.
not know.
Your mother also sang here in the local chapel, right?
Every Sunday.
Every Sunday with her sister Carmen
played the organ. My mother played the organ too, but Carmen was better, so she played it, you know.
So I know from talking to you and Geraldine that your mother was just extremely vivacious and always
She was.
full of fun.
She was.
Life of every party.
She was, you just couldn't help but be attracted to her. She just was happy, and she was such a kind, loving person, you know. She, would be happy and hug everyone, and she would remember people and kind things about them to say and ask, everybody would phone and say, how's your dear mother? And, everybody, I can't even tell you how wonderful she was.
Who was she most like, your grandmother or your grandfather?
They were both, to me, quite, they were older, but that's silly. They weren't as interested in childish things. My mother could really play jacks or skip rope, or, she could be a child.
She was full of fun.
Yes, she could do whatever you wanted to play. She was interested in life, and I think they were older and more settled, and they were wonderful people, and they would enjoy talking with you, but they couldn't really skip rope with you or run a race or relay or.
Your mother had beautiful blue eyes,
She did.
as you do.
Francisco, her brother, and mother were the only blue-eyed children. The others had brown eyes. The gene is a recessive gene, Yeah.
Tell me, what do you remember about Francisco, your Uncle Pancho?
Well, I liked him very much because he was, had such a wonderful sense of humor, and he used to talk to me all the time, you know, and think of something that I'd like to see, or take me to a circus, or to a horse show, or, you know, he wasn't limited to just adult people. I mean, he liked children, and I always enjoyed being with him. You know?
Do you remember when he got married to Tweety?
I remember it was quite a surprise to everybody in the family because they eloped, and but it was during the war. I can't remember the date now, but I always liked her. She was a school teacher, UCLA graduate, and we always got along beautifully, you know.
So Uncle, what did you call him?
I
Theo?
called Theo.
Theo. And so he was full of fun.
Yes.
Your Aunt Carmen, full of fun.
Yes.
And of course you rode with her in parades.
Yes.
And I want to talk about that separately. And what do you remember about your Aunt Rose? Rosa.
I wasn't as close to Rosa. She's the one who told my grandfather that I tied the horse up with the reins, and I never forgot it. I had to keep my eye on her all the time, you know. She's just, I always felt that I wasn't to walk with Gloria or Rosita because I might take him over and put him in the swimming pool or something, you know.
Get him in trouble.
I'd get him in trouble. And so I was too old for Gloria and Rosita at Rose thought. You know, and I would be able to take care of them. Of course, I could have taken good care of them, you know.
And what do you remember about your Aunt Nuni?
I didn't know her very well. She was much younger than my mother, and my mother didn't see her either because she lived in Ventura. She married an architect in Ventura, and
Harold Burkett.
He wasn't here. They weren't here very often, except maybe Christmas. You know, didn't have very.
Did
much.
you grow up knowing her children? They were your cousins,
They were my cousins.
Susanna
But they were
and
still in
Paquita.
a different age, for some reason, a different age level, you know.
So they,
We were friendly.
you were, yeah, but because where they lived, they weren't frequent visitors as your other aunts and uncles and cousins were.
No, that's right.
Do you remember about Sunday gatherings here at the ranch?
Well, we usually always went to say Mass in Camarillo together, and then we'd come back here maybe and have coffee. The adults would have coffee, and the Natividad, the cook, would have orange juice for the children. And then we'd go down and see the horses and give them apples, and sometimes ride them if we could get on them, you know, if we could catch them. And
You never did your own saddling or grooming of the horses, did you? Was there someone here to do that?
No, I rode bareback so that I wouldn't have to saddle. But I did learn to saddle when I was older. Oh, sure, I saddled my own horse.
Yeah.
I always saddled the outlaw.
Did you?
I had to stand on the
The stool.
Yeah, well, the feeding was.
Oh, you mean the feed bin?
Yeah, just to get the saddle on, you know, and it was always so heavy. But he would stand just so. He wouldn't fight me at all. He would help me, you know. He'd almost say to me, "No, the left hand, the right hand." You know, I felt that he was on my.
You were probably the only one he'd let go near him at that
That's
point.
right. He didn't like anybody.
Anybody.
It was swell. I just loved it.
So then, would the family stay for dinner after Sunday?
Well, sometimes if it was a birthday or something,
Okay.
you know. But they had lots of family things going on all the time, and lots of people dropping in from San Francisco or Los Angeles, or you know.
So did you speak English or Spanish with your grandparents?
I always spoke English, and my mother taught us a little Spanish, but since my father spoke no Spanish, we spoke English at home.
Okay.
And my mother told me she learned English in school. She did not speak Spanish at home ever.
Interesting. So when you spoke to your aunts and uncles, you spoke in English as well?
In English, yes. If they even bothered speaking to me, but they didn't care too much. There were so many kids, they didn't really care too much about talking to you, I don't think.
Okay, I want to ask you about, we heard about camping trips with your grandfather.
Oh, he loved Yosemite, and so he had an annual pilgrimage to Yosemite, and he took the grandchildren, and it was absolutely wonderful. My father was usually his aide, and so he would go to help, and they'd spend 2 weeks packing all the carriages, cars that were trucks and all kinds of things, packing everything that had to be taken. One funny thing was the cook said to my grandfather once in front of Carmen, who told me, where are the Gallina's going to sleep? Because we had to take sleeping bags for all the grandchildren and pack them first, I guess, when I was trying to help a little, but I didn't do much. Anyway, the cook, Natividad, said, the Gallinas don't need a box to sleep in, they just need a stick. Because we called the Gallinas the 2 chickens, and they were the working girls.
Oh, Susana and Paquita?
They were always the Gallinas. And so whenever we were talking about the Gallinas, people would get mixed up and say, we're going to have fried Gallinas for dinner, and then it was always getting I don't know who nicknamed them, but that was the only nickname I can remember.
Oh, that's
the
cute.
Gallinas.
That's cute.
The little chickens.
So all of your cousins went on these camping trips?
Well, the Gallinas did, and the
Gloria?
Burketts and the FitzGeralds and
The Pettis.
the Pettis, 3 families.
And would the mothers stay at home?
The mothers stayed at home. I don't know what they did when we were gone.
And you were gone about a week?
Probably.
And you remember all the packing and the preparation that went on, and you said your father assisted Don Adolfo and all of that.
Mhm.
What did you do when you were camping? Were you just...
We went on hikes, and the forest rangers were wonderful. They still are. You've probably gone back recently, haven't you? They have all kinds of tours arranged for you so that you can hike to one waterfall one day and another waterfall another day. And, they kept us busy all the time. It was wonderful.
So you packed your own food and everything. So who cooked on those camping trips?
Natividad went.
Oh, she went.
She scrambled, 5,000 eggs every morning. I don't know. I just stay in the kitchen with her, but.
Wow, that's fantastic. Did the grown-ups sleep in sleeping bags as well, or did they have cabins?
We must have had cabins, but I don't remember that.
It's okay,
I'm probably so tired I went right to sleep.
Do you know where, this is what really getting off the subject, but Don Adolfo always wore suits.
Oh, always.
Always.
And tie.
And tie. Do you know where he bought his suits? Did he have a tailor come to the house and measure him, or?
No, I think he went to Los Angeles.
He went to LA. And probably Doña Isabel had
Her dress is made
her
too.
dresses made in LA as well. Yeah, okay.
Now, I don't know any of that.
Well,
I'm just guessing.
That's just your what you remember.
Mhm.
They had beautiful carpets in the house that I think someone told me came from LA, right?
They came from Persia.
They came, well, but I mean they were purchased probably in Los Angeles.
Well, probably he had
a connection.
So I don't know. I don't know about that.
Okay.
But they're lovely, anyway.
Yeah. You remember them vividly.
Yeah, I have a couple of them.
Yeah, good for you. Okay, now's the best part, the white horses.
Okay,
All right. So we've already gone over Diablo is your favorite white horse.
that's right.
When did you start riding in the parades? How old were you?
High school, I guess. I guess 8th grade. Maybe
Eighth grade. And who asked you? Did Carmen ask you, or your?
Carmen. Carmen was the important person.
She was the parade jefa.
Because I didn't realize it at the time, but she was always watching everybody, did you use the right hand or the left hand, she was watching everybody all the time. And you had to pass her criteria before you got a chance to ride.
So all of the women who rode in these parades were really quite good horse women, weren't they? I mean, you were all riding stallions, basically.
That's right. But the people in the parades couldn't always be the same people. Somebody asked me this recently. Because it was during the summer that they had the parades, mostly. And most of these people go on vacations and were gone. Some people were pregnant every big parade and didn't ride every time. And I know a few of those. And so it changed all the time. It was not always the same.
No,
And-
not always the same, but they always had to be good horsewomen, didn't they? Good
yeah.
riders.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so would you all get together and practice for a parade?
Yes,
Or
Carmen would invite us out to the ranch and say, come Thursday morning and be there at 9 and we'll ride till noon and I'll buy you lunch or something like that. And, you know, we just paraded from the stables, which have changed up here now, but that row of trees to
Right,
the house.
right.
To keep the horses together.
Okay, so you would just practice right here on the, what they used to call,
Some of the girls couldn't keep their horse in line with my horse, you know, so I had to tell them once in a while, yeah, don't get ahead of me, follow me.
was there, do you remember any horses that didn't get along? I mean, you're saying that a lot of horses didn't get along with your horse, Diablo. Did that pose a problem for you sometimes in parades, or were you always on the end, or how did
You
you?
usually put me on the end.
Okay. Okay. So Carmen was the big boss for anything that regarded the parades.
Yes.
Where did you, like on a day of the parade, did you meet here at the house first?
No, we took our own cars and we met at the parking lot at that big park across from the beach where the yacht club is.
Is this for the Fiesta
Santa
Day
Barbara.
parades?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was the important parade.
yes, yes.
The others are all small.
Well, except for the Rose Parade.
Well, the Rose Parade was big, yeah.
Yeah. So did you drive your own cars while you were in costume to the parade, or did you change?
Oh, you couldn't change. You
You had to go
You had to go dressed.
ready to
Yeah.
go. So the first parade that you ever rode in,
I was in eighth grade. I
eighth
think,
grade, and was that a Santa Barbara Fiesta?
At Santa Barbara Fiesta.
Wow. What was that
I
like?
just begged Carmen so many times. She finally said, "Oh yes, you can ride."
So your cousins rode as well? Did Gloria ride in parades and Rosita?
Later on, they were so much younger than me. I have a hard time remembering. I have a hard time keeping track of other people. You find that out. I mean, you know, my own kids I keep track of, but I don't remember exactly what my cousins did from time to time. But usually they were nearby, some place.
So, just from your, right now, your recollection of riding in past parades, can you name just a few of the women that you definitely remember riding with?
I remember riding with Gloria.
Okay.
I remember riding with Rosita. I remember with Susana and Paquita. And those are 4 cousins.
Right.
They were the most frequent riders.
Okay. And of course, your Aunt Carmen.
Well, always Carmen.
Always
we
Carmen.
wouldn't have been in it if it hadn't been for Carmen.
Right, okay. Any family, friends? Was there a Rose McLaughlin, or?
She rode once or twice, I think, yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Remember any other family friend that seems to pop up in your memory?
My brother was dating a girl from Italy, and her name was Eliana Canay. I don't know, do you know the Canay family? They have a big ranch in Ojai. Anyway, she rode a couple of years, I think. I enjoyed riding with her. I can't remember anybody else.
Did you love all the pomp and circumstance, or what?
Oh, heavens, yes.
It was like a big party then.
The horses just loved it, you know.
The horses loved
Let's
it.
go to a party, yeah.
And were there any traditions afterwards? I mean, did Carmen all take you out for dinner, or what happened at the end?
Somebody always had parties, but we went different places, you know. I mean, sometimes my grandfather used to give a party, and we were all invited to that, but usually I would have a date, and that person would take me someplace with his family or something. So I don't remember the family afterwards. I remember being more in a different group of people.
Right. Well, you were younger as well. Do you remember who designed the dresses that you wore for the parades? or-
Carmen did.
Carmen designed everything.
She did.
And then there was a woman, was it Mrs. Flynn?
Mrs. Flynn sewed them. I went in once for 10 minutes and she said, turn around, and I turned around and she said, come back tomorrow, and I went back and it was made.
God.
And I still wear it. It's the same size. I mean, it always fits.
Well, you are amazing.
I don't know, I think she's the best seamstress in Camarillo.
Is that one of your most fond memories of the ranch, is just the participation with the horses and the riding and
The horses made
the horses
everything for me, yeah.
So when you would come over to visit, maybe on a weekend or something,
Mhm.
as a family function, Carmen did sometimes saddle up some horses and you'd just go out for a trail ride, or,
Yes.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And would that just be anybody who wanted to come, or was it, I know you were always involved, but,
But most people wouldn't saddle their own horses, so they didn't get invited.
I see. Did
Well,
Melatonin help?
unless you wanted to saddle somebody's horse, but I wouldn't volunteer for that job. I stayed out of that, but anyway.
But there were sort of casual rides around the ranch with,
I don't think everybody was quite as eager to ride as I was, maybe. My sister always said that I was sort of too interested in horses. I don't know.
did Jerry ride? Did
No.
Geraldine ever
No.
ride? How about your brothers, Gerald or Jim?
No.
No, really? None of your
I
siblings?
think maybe they did it maybe once in a while for something, but
Did your mother ride?
old mother loved to ride.
She
yes.
loved to ride.
Yes.
Did she ever ride in parades?
No, I don't think so. 'Cause she was always, I don't think so.
Your father liked to ride, though.
I thought, for a while, the husbands rode in parades. Al Pettit rode in a parade with my father once. I remember the two men riding.
Carmelita, do you remember any famous people that would come to the ranch that really stand out in your mind? I know one of them, who was a friend of Don Adolfo's, was Leo Carrillo, but I don't know.
He was here. I've met him. I've been to his house. He used to have parties and have Camarillos too. No, the governor was here.
Which governor?
I can't remember.
Anyway.
Rolfe, Governor Rolfe, I guess it was, yeah. He was a personal friend of my grandfather's. My grandfather was on several boards in Sacramento, and he went to Sacramento for meetings, and then it met people who wanted to see the ranch and sort of told him that they really were interested, and so he said, well, come on down, and so they came, and lots of people would drop in and see the ranch.
I know your grandmother loved to travel, didn't she?
Yes.
She loved to go to Europe,
Mhm.
and I don't recall who told me the story, but one time your grandmother and grandfather went away on a vacation, and your grandfather said all he could think about was coming home, how things were doing on the ranch.
When she got home from Europe, the time I remember, I said, how did you like Europe, Nana? And she said, oh, I loved it. And I said, how did Tata like Europe? And she said, oh, he loved it. But every morning he'd say, I wonder what they're doing on the ranch today. Every morning, she said, he'd say the same thing, I wonder what they're doing at the ranch.
So he really loved
He
it
was
here.
homesick for the ranch.
He was homesick.
He loved it.
But as you just said, he did travel quite a bit on state business to
Oh, yes.
Sacramento.
Mhm.
So he was very much involved with the lawmakers of the time, and he was a longstanding board member of the
School
school
board,
board
yes.
here. So as a little girl, I would think that a man who was that important in his community you were sort of awestruck.
Oh,
With
well,
him.
yes, I was. I
Yeah.
always thought he was very, very special, you know.
So even as you grew
Without even knowing what he did, I just knew he was a very special person.
And as you grew into adulthood and interviewed him to write this book, how had your perceptions changed, or
And they haven't changed. He
not a
was
bit?
always sort of what I thought as a child, just as a very outstanding, example to Californians, because he came here as, he inherited the ranch. He was 16 years old and took over just nothing but rocks and
Dirt.
nothing but mud, and made it into one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the state.
Did he like to talk business?
I'm sure he did,
But with family,
but I don't know that, he had his advisors, he chose them very carefully, I'm sure. But I'd go to meetings with him, and I could see him very intensely interested in talking with people, and he understood very well. He was not only bilingual, he understood in English very much what American business meant.
mm-hmm.
And he kept his hands on the reins. He knew exactly what.
Now, even though he was an important man in the community, at home, your grandmother was a very strong and very vivacious woman, wasn't
Yes,
she? Someone said that. Where did they sit at the table when?
Oh, she sat at the head, and he sat at her left.
So that.
That somebody told me that is a custom in Mexico, but I don't know. One person told me. I was trying to find out something about the manners in Mexico, but I'm not sure I did very well. Anyway.
What is your most vivid? If you were to describe your grandmother, how would you describe her?
Oh, she was regal. She walked into a room and everybody knew she was there because she just had great stature and a beautiful smile, and she was so kind to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
She could have been a very great snob, but she wasn't. I never saw her say anything unkind to anybody. She was always a very kind, thinking person and loving person.
She used to make empanadas.
And she was a good cook. She liked to cook. Empanadas are great. They had all the food in the world here on the ranch, and just like Camelot, it was amazing. And they'd boil all the fruit for days and days, and then they'd make the little patties and little tiny pies, and have them and keep them for tea parties for the rest of the year.
So she would make those with nati?
Well, she had a whole staff.
She had a whole staff.
They had staff in the kitchen. When we had Thanksgiving, we always had several people that I didn't know their names, but because lots of people would be gone for the holidays,
Right.
and then they'd have to get substitutes. But they'd have to have help on Christmas and birthdays.
So you not only remember the empanadas, but what else did she make that you loved?
Well, she made tortillas just perfectly round, perfect and thin. And in the afternoon, we could come by after school, and she'd make a tortilla. She just had them ready to go anytime. Good ones, with homemade jam too.
Oh. And your mother? What was some of the things your mother made that you especially
My
adored?
mother made wonderful chili rellenos, and so whenever they had a family party, they'd always say, "Always going to bring the chili rellenos." Poor mother, they're the hardest thing of all to make. The other things they could just make in no time. Mother would be making them for days, dozens and dozens of chili rellenos.
So are you a good cook in return?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
You'd rather be out with the horses.
I'd rather be outside.
If you were to wrap up your life experience and all the things that you have learned from your grandparents and parents, what would you like to pass on future generations about this area and about the people who lived here? What would you tell them?
Well, I just think there's no more wonderful place in the world than Camarillo, and but I think we are overpopulated now, so I can't say that anymore, and I can't tell people that, but that's what I really would say, I guess. And the people who live here seem to have breathed in the wonderful air that's here and made them happy, and giving people, generous people. All the people that I meet here are just wonderful people.
Your grandfather gave you some great advice once. Something about a horse and land.
Oh, well, he said never sell any land. God isn't making any more.